What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Brad Wharton to look ahead to Cage Warriors 176, which goes down September 7th over in Glasgow. And Brad, the first thing I have to ask you is Glasgow, because I feel I've been watching old cards, obviously preparing for this fight, and some of the Glasgow events popped up, and the crowd, the noise, it's just different, isn't it? In Glasgow, for a long time, they didn't get a whole lot of MMA. They're getting more and more MMA now, all the time, and I think there's a reason for that. It's such a great place. I assume you're very much looking forward to getting back there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was there for the first Cage Warriors event in Glasgow, which was, I want to say, October or November 2012. We went back in 2013. And it was this year, I believe, this year or the year before, that we went back again. So a big break between Cage Warriors visits, and the crowd when we turned up for the most recent event were absolutely incredible. It sold really well, and the Scottish crowd turned out in force. The atmosphere, absolutely phenomenal. We saw so many people come down to the Newcastle show at the end of last year from Scotland to cheer on the likes of Chris Bungard against Perry Goodwin, to cheer on the likes of Reece McEwan. So we knew we had to go back, and I think the atmosphere that we had last time, proved that we were in the right, and we're looking forward to more of the same. Obviously, a lot of the guys on that last card didn't get the results that they might have wanted, but there's big chances for redemption for the likes of Bungard and McEwan this time out. So very excited to see what's going to go down next week.
It's very interesting before we get into the card, because obviously, look, I'm here from Ireland. We know the scene it's been like here. We've talked about Italy a few times on previous podcasts, but even the likes, let's say Liverpool with Next Gen and Paddy and all of those lads coming through, or even is it the Northwest or Northeast, with Newcastle and Sunderland and all of that. Very good scene. What do you think about Glasgow and Scotland? Because we all, the Dinky Ninjas is a great gym, and they've always had fighters coming through. But it feels to me, looking through this card, but also outside the likes of Paul Craig in the UFC and others as well, that the scene in Scotland is something that maybe came a little bit later in terms of the quality than all the rest of them, but it's getting stronger and stronger all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Scotland's a weird one in that, it's not the biggest country, but, population-wise, it's kind of quite spread out. So you've not got like the density of gyms that you're going to see in big cities like London, Manchester, Liverpool. But, you've got higher level, you've got the Grip House still going strong, you've got teams in Aberdeen, you've got SBG Murray up north that Aidan Stephen fights out of. So there's plenty of hotbeds of talent there. There's a lot of grappling up in Scotland as well. There's a lot of Thai boxing in Scotland. So they've definitely got that good foundation. And I think it's like anything, when more shows go to Scotland. Obviously, we've been there a couple of times recently, and I'm sure we've got plans to go again next year. I think PFL are there at the end of September as well. These kind of things spark the scene a little bit. So, you're going to see more gyms popping up. You're going to see maybe good coaches traveling to Scotland. You're going to see people doing seminars in Scotland, and that's only going to help the scene rise from the bottom.
Let's talk about the cards on. Let's get to the main event, I suppose, straight away. George Hardwick is fighting for the lightweight title against Cristian Iorga. And let's start with George, because I suppose he's like maybe the big story of this card, considering he was on the Contender Series, ended up losing that fight, didn't really look like himself in that fight. And I think this is such a massive fight for him, because watching back some of his old fights, a lot of his top level ability comes when he's free flowing and confident and smooth. Is that a big factor, do you think, coming in here, how he's gonna feel, how confident he's going to be after that fight? Because we know, we've seen it with guys before that have gone and have had that opportunity. Obviously it wasn't their time. They need to maybe have 2 or 3 more to get back. I don't think anyone looks at George Hardwick and doesn't think he has the ability to go and fight in the UFC eventually, but to nearly get there and have to go back in, it's a big mindset adjustment for someone like Hardwick, and it's a big factor coming in here, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This sport is quite cruel in the sense that, you compare it to a sport like football, for example. Every striker has that game where they just can't find the back of the net, and every defender has that game where they just don't get the tackles in. But you've got 30, 40 games a season, and you have that one bad game, and it doesn't really matter. You know, for guys in combat sports, whether you're boxing, MMA, whatever else, you have that one bad night, and it can actually, you know, put the brakes on you a little bit. And look, George went to the Contender Series. We've all seen the kind of wrecking machine that he was in previous fights on Cage Warriors, and he was fighting some high-level guys, you know, guys like Jan Lias, guys like Kyle Driscoll. He fought the former featherweight champion Dean Truman on his debut, and he smashed everyone. Now, let's be honest, he ran through everyone, and he's running through good guys, but he just had that off night. Obviously, the big frustration then comes in the fact that he's getting ready to return to Cage Warriors in March, I believe, of this year originally. And then he has that broken jaw, you know, a fully, completely down the middle split jaw. And that obviously takes a lot of time. You know, when your professions involves getting punched in the head, you can't rush that one. You've got to take your time and get back to that. So, you know, it's been a long time now since we've seen George in the famous yellow gloves. I'm sure he's more than ready to step back in, but absolutely that confidence and that flow is going to be a big factor because, as you say, he did feel like he was in, you know, such a good place in that run that he had through Cage Warriors. And then when you see the disruption with the loss on Contender Series and then the injury necessitating a long time out the cage, you've got to wonder how that affects a guy. Will it affect George? We'll have to see. You know, on the other side of the argument, he's had a bit of time to collect his thoughts. He's been able to bury that Contender Series issue, and he's been chomping at the bit, right? Because he was supposed to fight, you know, half a year ago. He is ready to get back in the cage right now. So, you know, it could go one or two ways. It could go that there's a bit of rust, a bit of nervousness that he's going to have to overcome once the bell sounds, or he could just go in there and do something absolutely horrendous to this poor guy.
It's a good point, though. Maybe that the issue we were just talking about has kind of been already gotten out of the way because of the cancelled fight. And, you know, as you said, the little bit of time maybe, like I think we even saw it last week or a couple of weeks ago now at this stage with Steve Erceg on the UFC. Like, you know, he nearly won the title. And next thing, he's lost 2 fights in a row. You know, it's so close. You know, and same thing could happen to Hardwick because he's coming in here against a guy in Cristian Iorga who is, you know, a new guy to Cage Warriors. How many times have we seen Ian Dean bringing in guys that we hadn't heard of before and they perform very well. And watching some of his fights, you know, he's 7-1, and a really interesting guy. He holds his hands high, wild punches, but kind of picks the wild punches at the same time, and then he kind of dives in for big takedowns. Lots of fakes and feints, you know, very fast, good kind of body slams and a very good top game as well. I don't know, watching him, I don't know, is there anyone I kind of compare him to? You know, usually when there's like a new fighter, it feels like he's a wrestle first fighter, but the way he throws his hands, I don't know if that's completely accurate. Look, against George Hardwick, he might be trying to adjust to that, but we'll talk more about George in a second. But on Cristian, watching the tape, and was there anything that stood out to you apart from the fun, I suppose, because he does seem like a very fun guy.
Yeah, he's definitely great value. I think one of the things that stood out to me, and I don't want to say unsubmittable because I believe he's had an amateur loss by submission, but he looks hard to tap. You know, whether it's, you know, I've watched a lot of his grappling as well. He's had a lot of pro grappling experience, and he gets sometimes in some bad spots, and guys just can't finish him. They just can't do it. I believe he lost by armbar very early in his amateur career. And this is probably another point to pick up on as well. When you look at his amateur career, it's not just on the kind of regional scene at home. The vast majority of his amateur career is IMAF tournaments, and he's excelled in those tournaments. You know, he's gone very far. He's gone to the bronze. He's gone to the silver medal matches consistently over the years. So this is a guy, yes, he may be just like 7-1 as a pro, but he's got a lot of experience on his side. So, you know, do not write the more novice record off in that respect. As a pro, again, you know, not really seen like that many flaws in him. Like he's taken big shots in a couple of fights. And, you know, I was watching a fight this morning, actually doing a bit of tape studying, and he took one of the most hellacious head kicks I've ever seen, and he ate it like a ham and cheese sandwich. Like, it didn't bother him in the slightest. The guy, and it busted his face open. He was leaking all over the place, dropped into the seat of his pants, and he was back on his feet immediately. He wrestled in for the single leg, and he spent the rest of the round in top position. He's got that kind of wherewithal about him. So when he does take a big shot, when he does get himself in a bad spot, he can always seem to find his way out of it. Now, with such an offensively minded fighter as George, you're going to think that he will take shots at some point, and he will be put in bad positions. And I think how he deals with that against George is going to be the key to this fight. Now, the other guys I've seen him get put in bad spots by, it's been one big shot or they've got very close with a submission. I think with George, it's going to be different. It's going to be an accumulation of punches that we often see, or it's the shot setting up that sneaky guillotine entry that he likes to go for. So I think it's going to be a real chess match here. I think the longer it goes, the more it favors George. We're talking about a guy here in Cristian who's a bit shorter and a bit more heavy set. So is the cardio going to be there over 5 rounds? We've yet to find out. Although he is a champion on the regional scene, he's not gone 5 rounds yet. So that's going to be interesting to see. And we saw George come on really, really strong against Carl Driscoll as the fight went on. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a real chess match here. And I think, as you say, not everybody always knows some of these guys that Ian Dean plucks out of obscurity. But, who knew about Tobias Harila before Ian Dean had him on Cage Warriors, right? Who knew about Alexander Loof?
So many lads like that. It's funny. I think I watched that same fight of yours because I forwarded it in a bit, to pass all like the entrance bits and all, and I just saw Iorga on top of his opponent and there's blood all over the opponent. I was like, is he after landing an elbow there or something? Rewound back to realise it was Cristian Iorga's blood itself just pouring all over your man. But I was talking to Danny McCormick the other day, and she had a similar thing happen. She got split open but spilled all of her blood all over her opponent, and that's kind of a benefit sometimes, even though you're the one that's bleeding. When your opponent is covered in your blood, it kind of brings something visceral out of you, I think, and he's definitely one of those guys. But I think for George, we talked about the confidence there, but I think, look, if it gets into a fight and he's in that mode, I think it will come back. But it's going to be very difficult for Cristian if they get into like a range boxing striking match to deal with him, because George Hardwick is so good on that. He also has kind of a similar type of high guard stance than Cristian has, which I think will be a benefit from him, because Hardwick is kind of proven that he's so good, like throwing his range finders and in the power behind it. We know, again, you just said he was unsubmittable. We'll see how unsubmittable he is when that power guillotine from George Hardwick comes out, because watching one of the fights, I think it was yourself and Dan Hardy, and the second he dipped down, the both of you were kind of, guillotine, here's the guillotine coming. So you know that's how good it is. But I think, I mentioned with the Cristian picking the shots as well, I don't think there's anyone at this level who's picking their shots better than George Hardwick, and who has the ability, I suppose, to kind of dominate a person in that area than Hardwick has. Like, he has very good takedown defense as well. I think Iorga, in my opinion, I think what he'll try to do is try to strike with him for a while, try to not get kind of drawn in, because Hardwick is one of those guys as well. He kind of waits and waits and waits, and the second he knows he's range, he will just attack you and throw those knees to the body and hurt you on the inside. I think Iorga needs to cut that off and wrestle him before you get to that position. That'll be the winning of the fight, I think, because if George Hardwick can stop that, I think he can beat him on the feet. So my pick is going to be, I know you can't give your picks, but I'm going to pick Hardwick, and I think that's the way he gets it done. But I think it should be a very, very fun one in here. Any final thoughts on that? It's a big fight for George, and I know his brother as well for the weight class down below. There's a lot of gold around the Hardwick family, and it'd be great to have the both of them there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, George is still the lightweight champion. He never lost that belt. So he's obviously coming back off the Contender Series thing, wanting to erase that from recent memory. And I think just for him to be able to lift that belt with his brother in the corner, and his brother has the belt as well. The coach, Abdul Muhammad, a former Cage Warriors champion too. A Cage Warriors champion from so long ago. He didn't actually get a belt, he got a trophy. So there's generations of talent coming out of that gym. And I think for them, for those 3 guys to be in the cage this weekend with their arms raised high will be a fantastic moment. But look, Cristian Iorga, he's not here to make up the numbers. As we say, he's a champion back in the regional scene in his home nation. He's very, very highly thought about. He's got a lot of tools. He's got a really, really snappy double leg takedown, which is something we've not really seen George have to deal with yet. So I'm predicting a lot of fun in this one.
Well, I don't know if it's the co-main event or not. I suppose that'll come out closer to the fight, but we have a new fight. Brad, do you want to tell us about that? There was an injury this morning, and we have a rematch going on.
Well, yeah, so Chris Bungard, unfortunately, he lost his opponent earlier today. Ian Dean is trying to sort out an opponent as we speak. A frustrating situation. Obviously, Chris, one of the bigger names in Scottish MMA. He headlined last time against Dimitri Gilin. Unfortunately, wasn't successful on that occasion. And he was in a feature bout on the Newcastle card towards the end of last year. And it seemed like he brought half of Scotland with him to that Newcastle event. The noise in there was deafening. Bear in mind, he was fighting a guy in Perry Goodwin from Sunderland. It seemed 50-50 in the arena, which was absolutely insane. Really hoping that Chris Bungard can get rematched. Obviously, it's as we record this, it's Thursday the week before. So we have faith in Ian Dean to work his matchmaking magic on this one. And I know, Chris has been preparing really, really hard in the run up to this one. He was not happy about how that last fight ended. He really wants this kind of a final run and these big main events and main card placements in Scotland towards the end of his career. So yeah, really hoping Chris can get matched. It's a tough fight for absolutely anyone on the day. My goodness, man, we had a list of the Cage Warriors lightweight division, like just the guys who are signed to multi-fight deals in the office today, and kind of just looking at what could potentially be next for him. And it's quite the division. Like you look at that division and you're thinking, I wouldn't really bet on many of these guys against many of the others, to be honest. So always a good place to be in. But yeah, hopefully Chris gets matched, and the atmosphere during his walkouts is unparalleled in Scotland.
Yeah, he's proper Scottish, isn't he? I remember interviewing him one time and kind of mentioning that I was like in Glasgow like a couple of weeks before, and then he just proceeded to tell me everything about Glasgow for like the next 20 minutes, and I had no more questions to ask him. So he absolutely loves it, and he needs to be on the card, and I'm sure Ian will provide that. Before we get into the tournament, let's talk a little bit about the Reece McEwan fight. He's fighting Miguel Haro, a guy who kind of retired, or he was out of the game for 6 or 7 years, came back, had a couple of tough fights, but ended up winning his last fight. For Reece, this is a massive fight in his career. Lost his last 2 fights. Cameron Elt's a very, very close fight. Obviously could have won that, but then Liam Gittins, obviously the champion, lost there as well. For a guy who's still very young in his career, still under 30, this is a massive fight on home soil as well for him, out of the grip house, as you mentioned earlier on, one of the top gyms, and it's massive for Reece McEwan, because I think, if you'd have gone back to this time last year, a little bit before, you were thinking, right, he's the next guy, he's going to go on, maybe win the title, go straight to the UFC. But again, like a little bit like George Hardwick, it just didn't work out at the time, and it's massive to kind of get back to winning ways for Reece, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Reece is a great guy and a fantastic fighter, and he kind of burst onto the Cage Warriors scene during that weird COVID era. And he did a solid run through the 135-pound division. And, he ran into Liam Gittins in that title fight, and it wasn't his night. Now, look, let's be honest. He could have taken a much, much easier fight than Cameron Else for his next fight back after that. He's obviously a big star for Cage Warriors in Scotland, brings a massive crowd, whether he's fighting in London, whether he's fighting in Manchester, whether he's fighting in Scotland. He could have taken a very easy fight to just get back on track after that. And he was calling for the toughest guys in the division. When that possibility of fighting Cameron Else came up, he was all over it. And we all know how good Cameron is. And we saw that in that fight. It's a very, very close, very high level contest. You could say the same thing again now. He could have had a much easier opponent than Miguel Haro. This is a guy who's, let's be honest, got a mixed record. But if you look at the guys he's lost to, he's not losing to bums. He's not losing to chumps. He's been in there with some good guys. I think a lot of people probably will have, if they do remember Miguel, they probably first came across him when he fought Paddy Pimblett on FCC back in the day. But he's been in there with a bunch of good guys. He's only 30. I think he's 32 or 34 or something. So still, a pretty young guy himself. Had a bit of time off. He's won his last 2. This is a test fight for Reece. It's absolutely a test fight for him. This is a real litmus test. He's got to beat guys like Miguel Haro. He's got to beat these tough, crafty veterans if he's going to get back on that title run.
Yeah, you look at Haro, and of all the fights he's had 20 fights. I think he's only had 2 knockouts. So I think, for Reece, watching him, I think a big issue in his game is he just eats too many counters, and I think maybe against a guy like Haro it might be, less of a concern than it normally would be, and I think that's good matchmaking really by Ian Dean. Like, just to quickly run through the type of fight, it might be like McEwan is one of these kind of fast pressure fighters who has good takedowns and good subs. Nearly got the armbar against Cameron Ellis as well in that fight, but also nearly got knocked out in that fight. So that's Reece McEwan all over. To me, he's one of these guys that, some guys need 2 fights. Some guys need 10 fights. I think he's somewhere in the middle. He needs 5 or 6 fights. Get away those little issues in his game, and because he's like a very, very good fighter, and he just needs to fix a few. Here on the other side of it, very good technical fighter, good hands, good takedowns, and all that. I think he'll put up a good matchup, but I think Reece McEwan will win this one, and I think he'll get through it. Let's talk about the tournament. I saw a bit of blowback for this tournament because the Sean Clancy's not in he's the reserve bout. Look, that's the way the cookie crumbles. That's the way the decision was made by the powers that be in Cage Wars. I'll be honest, I kind of like that. Sticking to it. The cards fall where they may, but still, you never know. The last one went perfectly, but is that going to happen again? Is someone going to get caught? Is something going to happen? The last one was brilliant. I assume you're looking forward to this one just as much, Brad. It's a fun one, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, look, I get it. I certainly get it. I understand the Scottish fans really want to see Sean Clancy in that. And trust me, we really did as well. We got some stick online. And, people saying that like we'd fixed it for Sean Clancy not to be in the tournament. If we were going to fix it, we'd have fixed it for him to be in the tournament. That would have made the most sense for us as, as a promotion, as a business, as fans, as everything else. Like, we all want Sean Clancy in this tournament. But look, everyone signed up, for the same rules. Everyone knew it was a random draw, and here we are. But look, as you quite rightly say, things went perfectly as planned last time. That isn't always the case. If you look at the last the bantamweight tournament that we did in Wales back in the day that Brett Johns won, alternate in the finals. You look at the lightweight tournament in London, alternate in the finals. Chris Fields won the Cage Warriors middleweight title as an alternate after losing in the semi-finals. There's a million and one things that can go wrong in these tournaments. You could be injured, you could be cut, you could be not medically cleared for some other reason. You might not want to fight again after you've had, a torrid time in your semi-final fight. So there are definitely opportunities here for Sean Clancy to get back in. Something to note as well, he was drawn 5th, which means he's the first reserve fighter drawn, which means if one of the semi-finalists does not make weight, he is automatically in the tournament. He takes the place of any semi-finalist who does not make weight. You would like to think everyone will make weight for this, but again, the opportunity is there. Now, he was supposed to fight Jacob Sheffel, a NCAA wrestler, high-level wrestler, 7-0 in mixed martial arts. Jacob unfortunately withdrew, so he's now facing Rafael Aronov, who just came off a big win over Jamie Richardson in London. He's beat Next Generation's Ben Pettis Kelly. He had an absolute war with Emil Brown. Both those guys rocked each other, and he ended up losing in the second round, I believe. So, for Rafael as well, there's the opportunity here to get back in this tournament and perhaps have another crack at Emil Brown, who's one of the semi-finalists. So there's a lot going on here, and we've only talked about the reserve fight.
I want to talk a little bit more about that reserve fight, though. First of all, just on a run of big, tall, active striker, loves to touch with those leg kicks. Kind of this very weird, like, open hand guard, which just makes him so fun. And as you said, when you said both hurt in the Emil Brown fight, that's probably the most understated thing that we said on this podcast today. They were both at the same time as well. Like, he was almost finished, came back and made a massive shot in Emil Brown. What a fight that was. If anyone go on UFC Fight Pass, it's up there, and check that out. Rafael Aronov versus Emil Brown. That was absolutely unbelievable.
I was talking to I was talking to Raf's brother, Eli Aronov, who's also signed with Cage Warriors. You may have seen him on the Contender Series last year. I talked to him on the bus on the way back from that one, and he said, "You know what? The way we've both been brought up, you live by the sword, you die by the sword," and that for me perfectly encompasses Rafael. You know, I think he's 6-5 at the moment. He either wins big or he loses big, but he goes in there, with his heart on his sleeve, and I think this type of tournament's perfect for a guy like that, and he's a perfect test for Clancy because he's beatable, but if you give him an inch, he's going to take a mile.
100%. So on Sean Clancy, I remember a couple of years ago, myself and Quilcha DeBarra, journalist in the scene here over the Old Triangle podcast, we did a podcast where he knows the amateur scene better than anyone. I remember doing, here, pick out your top 5 fighters, we'll talk about them, and Sean Clancy was one of them. And I watched bits and pieces of him then, but yesterday was the first time I really watched a lot of Sean Clancy. And I'll tell you what, I very rarely look at a guy this young in their career and think this guy could be a UFC champion. But he's one of those guys. Honestly, he stood out to me. The first word you wrote, can you guess what the first word I wrote about Sean Clancy is? What do you think?
Big?
No, athlete.
He's big
close,
for the weight.
close,
Athlete, yeah.
athlete. An athlete like him in mixed martial arts stands out, right? Because an athlete like him is usually playing fucking rugby or soccer or American football or something like that. He is an unbelievable athlete, and he's smart with his fakes and his back leg kick. So good power counters, such a good jab. I think the only thing with him and it'll come, I think his jiu-jitsu. I think if he gets more of like a finisher's mentality, and that'll come on as well, I'm sure, but God almighty, this guy is, I can understand why the Scottish fans are so excited about him, because he is so good. And we've Conor McCarthy coming through here in Ireland as well. He's another guy who you look at and he's that good, and he signed with Cage Warriors obviously as well. Great breaking down the SPG divide, which is absolutely fantastic for everyone here in Ireland. But very, very happy to see Sean Clancy this weekend. Let's talk about the other matchups. Go on, do you want to say something about Sean for me?
Yeah, I was going to say quickly, I'm going to almost guarantee that conversation with the Hardwick wheelchair came after the Four Nations tournament that Clancy was in. Because I was there, commentating all 3 days of it, and I know Quilty was there as well. We talked a lot about the guys, and he did so well. He lost to Rowan Croker, one of Richard Shaw's guys, who has won amateur titles at welter, middle, and light heavyweight. And you're going to be hearing a lot about that guy too in a couple of years. He's just turning pro, I believe. But yeah, Sean Clancy, absolute savage.
100%. Let's talk about O'Meal Brown. He's fighting Henry Lintula, who's 8-1, who's a very, very good fighter as well. He big, tall guy. Getting hit doesn't seem to affect him. He's one of those guys, just like walks through him, good high kicks, good counter fighter. He's a very good jab. He just needs to throw it more, but good takedown defense. I'm not sure he'll need that here, but he's a very strong wrestler. Pulls guard even the odd time. Out of his 7 wins, I think he's 8 by submission. And my notes on O'Meal Brown is just bomber. That's my only notes on O'Meal Brown. As you know, one of my favourite fighters to watch. Honestly, when I saw this matchup, I was thinking like, oh God, who's this guy? What's this going to be like? I think this one's going to be real fun, because O'Meal's just going to be trying to put him out of it. And Lintula is just going to be trying to do all he can, I think, to get the fight to the ground. But at the same time, he's happy enough to strike as well. I think he's not one of those guys that, and for a guy who pulls guard and tries to get the fight to the ground a lot, he is confident enough in his hands as well. So I could see him striking with O'Meal. For how long does that last? We'll see. But it's an intriguing matchup, and as well, when you're fighting a couple of times in a night, I think that adjusts the way you fight. Like, can O'Meal go out and give it all in round 1 the way he normally does? It's an interesting. What do you think of that fight, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, of the semi-finals that were drawn, this was probably my favorite. You look at Lintula, he's 6'4", Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He loves a triangle. He loves an armbar off his back. A very, very competent grappler, and a guy who really chases submissions as well, which is always fun to see in mixed martial arts. O'Meal Brown, as we said, heavy puncher, and he's going to have a big target ahead of him now. A 6'4" guy is going to be, you would think, wide open for that big overhand right, overhand left that O'Meal's going to throw. If Lintula's maybe looking to be aggressive with the takedowns? Do we see the uppercut from O'Neal Brown? You know, we saw him knock out Jesse Hollin with that disgusting uppercut where he dropped him vertically. Hollin's head bounced off his own knee. One of my favorite Cage Warriors knockouts of all time. I think there's potential for something really crazy to happen in this one. You know, whether it's Lintula getting dropped and then looking up a triangle, or whether it's O'Neal Brown scoring another highlight reel knockout. But for me, this is the fight of the semi-finals in this tournament.
Big thing for O'Neal Brown here as well, and I think this is probably going to be a massive talking point, especially if he wins it. The two guys fighting for the title in a couple of weeks after this, he's lost to both of them. So the fact that you win this, and I'm not mistaken, you do get a title shot if you win this tournament, don't you? That's massive for him, because otherwise getting back to a title shot might have been a bit tough. You know, whoever wins, he's lost to them, so it's going to be tough. But if he wins this is a real opportunity for a guy like O'Neal Brown, and what a storyline that is. Like, if he ends up winning it and getting the rematch, then absolutely fantastic. This
is one of the great things for me about these tournaments, Sean. It's that I think whoever you are, if you come into this tournament and win, everyone's coming in off a win anyway, at least one. But if you come into this tournament, win 2 Cage Warriors fights in one night, your title shot material.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone can ever say the winner of these tournaments isn't going to deserve a title shot. So, you know, whether it's a guy who's lost to the two guys who are competing for a belt, whether it's someone who's never fought in the promotion before, anyone who wins this tournament is going to be a really intriguing fight for the champion. Look, we probably never thought that we would see this year Shirzad Kadrian fight Liam Gittins for the bantamweight belt, right? But Shirzad comes in, wins the prize fighter tournament in July, and now all of a sudden we've got this incredibly intriguing fight between Gittins, who, for my money, probably the most underrated guy in the Cage Warriors roster.
No.
If he goes through Kadrian, UFC, no problem whatsoever. If Kadrian beats Gittins, biggest win of his career.
Underrated in some circles. I believe Liam Gittins was the 2023 Sheehan Shaw Cage Warriors Fighter of the Year. So there you go. This is where you come for. The last matchup then, honestly, probably the one that people don't know as much about. Burama Kamara against Mario Kisic. But God almighty, this is a fun fight. Kamara, 6'4", big switch stance, body lock takedowns, throws hard in exchanges, big elbows on the ground. And Mario Kisic, he fought Chimaev back in the day. And that fight is up on YouTube, I believe. Go and watch that, because that's insane. He just throws.
He gives Chimaev a good fight.
Does, yeah.
You know, when you think how Chimaev was going through everybody and has pretty much continued to go through most people at that level, you know, for Marco to give him a good scrap like that, for me, speaks volumes.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's funny, I think he's changed his games somewhat since then. Like, he was just a madman on the feet back then, and he'd fall down and pull guard, and, you know, a load of submission wins, obviously, in his record. But watching some of his more recent fights, he's still an insane man, but he kind of fights a little bit slower and then just comes in with these massive overhand left hands, just, you know, fighting out of the southpaw position. Oh, again, one of those lads as well. I think the lads in the co-main event call it the Mark Coleman, where he looks so tired all the time, and then these massive shots come out of nowhere and these big takedowns come out of nowhere. It's funny as well, Kitchett. I didn't look up his height. I don't know if it's here, but he's 6 foot, but he kind of fights small.
He ain't 6'4".
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He does not look. I actually looked at that yesterday as well. I was shocked when I saw he was 6 foot, but sometimes that's an advantage when a guy is so tall like Kamara is, to be kind of a shorter guy, especially if you're trying to wrestle him. You could see him picking him up and just landing him on his head. But I'll tell you what, that's the sleeper fight for me. I think that'll be very, very fun. As we close it up here, Brad, what else should people be looking out for? I know Keir Harvey's on this card as well. There's a lot of new pros and a lot of young pros on this card as well. Tell the people on the undercard what to look out for.
I guess the one that jumped out to me, well, there's two that jump out to me immediately. The first of those is Damon Donald, 2-0, taking on Callum Parker. Callum's got a bit of a messy record. He is 3-4, I believe, at the minute. But this is a guy who's, you know, he was out in America training and fighting. He's turning up anywhere, fighting anyone. That ridiculous fight with Luke Riley last year, Cage Warriors Fight of the Year. Dropped Riley a couple of times in the opening exchange of the first round. and then went on to have an absolute barnstormer. He went on to have a short notice fight in Octagon, and the Riley fight as well was like a couple of days' notice. You know, this guy's an absolute stud. You know, we saw him last time out in Manchester, I believe, against Jack Claffey. Stopped him very, very early. This was a fight that he'd had a lot of time to prepare for, and I think you need to look past this kid's record. He's very, very young. You know, he turns up to fight with just his brother in his corner. He's got a lot of room to develop. And look, he's a madman. We've all seen him fight. It's always good fun. Dane McDonald as well had an incredible fight with Matteo Martignoni, the brother of the former Cage Warriors, a bantamweight champion, Michele Martignoni. And I think he stopped him after 2 rounds. His corner pulled him out because he just done so much damage. And he was like, look, I'm good. I'm fit. I'm not hurt. Get me back in there. So he gets his fight on home turf. So that's one that immediately jumps out to me. The other one, we talked about tall guys in the welterweight tournament at 6'4". Let's talk about a really tall guy at 6'8", Charles Joyner, a kickboxer from Australia. Got a knockout with knees to the body last time out against a guy who was 6'6", which is, you know, just an incredible like physical clash to see. He's fighting Brandon Guest, who's another big guy. Very, very extensive amateur record. IMF veteran, has fought on the likes of Golden Ticket in the UK, fought on Almighty in the UK. So a very, very well-credentialed amateur making his debut in the pro ranks. I'm a big old Pride fan from back in the day. So whenever you see a dude who's 6'8" and can blast people with knees, I'm all for that. I think that's going to be a very interesting clash on the undercard if anyone's looking for a reason to get there early.
And as always, the home of the future stars. So there'll be someone who will stick out in this undercard that maybe we didn't see or maybe didn't stick out to us before, but it always tends to happen. And if not, we have a top level lightweight fight, top level tournament as well in the welterweight
50
division.
G's.
I'm telling you, not bad for a night's work, is it? I wouldn't mind getting it myself.
And an extra 10 grand as well. But everyone in this tournament has the opportunity to predict their finish. First person who gets it right, 10 G's in the bank. Job done.
I like it. Do you remember before there used to be like a bounty thing? Remember, it was like if you hit a normal platter, that needs to be brought back. I love that. That was great fun. I remember it was the Joe Duffy card in Ireland, I think, and someone was going for fucking was it Reds or was going for toe holes the whole time. Did he get one? I think he might have got one the balls. But yeah, I love the idea of that. But yeah, fun card coming up. Can't wait as well. Obviously for Ireland, James Sheehan is going to be back in the next hour. We will talk about that in a couple of weeks' time. But until then, Brad, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And please tune in. Cage Warriors, September 7th, UFC Fight Pass all around the world. Have a watch. See the future stars of the sport. That's it from us today. We'll see you next time.